I used to think loyalty meant something. I gave 5 years of my life to that company. 5 years of late nights, missed birthdays, cold coffee, and endless spreadsheets. I wasn't just another employee. I was the glue that kept everything together. When deadlines piled up, I was the one who stayed until the lights dimmed and the janitor politely asked if I was ever going home. My boss, Mr. Richards, used to say, "You're my right hand, Clara." I believed him. Maybe that's why it hurt so deeply when I realized those words meant nothing. I remember the morning it started to change. I walked into the office carrying 2 lattes, one for me, one for him, like always. His door was closed, which was strange. He never kept it shut unless he was in a meeting. Through the frosted glass I saw a silhouette, someone sitting across from him. When the door opened, out walked a girl who looked barely 22, all bright lipstick, designer heels, and that careless confidence you only get when you've never had to fight for anything. He introduced her as Emily, his niece. At first, I smiled. I told myself not to judge. Everyone deserves a start. I even helped her set up her desk, showed her how to log into the system, where the printers were, all that routine stuff. She thanked me sweetly and called me ma'am. I laughed it off, thinking she was just being polite, but by the end of the first week, she was already sitting in meetings that I wasn't invited to. My reports were suddenly being reviewed by her before they reached Mr. Richards. When I gently asked him about it, he smiled and said, "Relax, Clara. She's family, just showing her the ropes." Family. That one word echoed in my head like a warning. The next few weeks felt like walking through quicksand. Tasks I'd done perfectly for years were suddenly questioned. Emily started suggesting new methods that made no sense but somehow got praised as innovative. Mr. Richards began copying her on every email, even the ones meant only for me. The office dynamic shifted overnight. My colleagues, who once came to me for guidance, now waited to see what Emily thought first. Still, I kept working. I told myself professionalism would win. Hard work speaks louder than bloodlines, right? One Friday evening, I was still at my desk long after everyone left, trying to fix a data mess Emily had created earlier. I heard laughter coming from Mr. Richards' office. Emily's voice, light and carefree, floated through the hall. "Uncle Mark, I think we should rebrand the department. Clara's tool, we need fresh energy." Then his laugh followed a deep, approving chuckle. That one broke something inside me. I stared at the spreadsheet until the numbers blurred. 5 years of loyalty, dismissed with one cruel joke. I packed up my things quietly that night, just my essentials, and took the latte mug I'd kept on my desk since my first day. On the bottom of it, in fading marker, it said "Boss Lady." It used to make me proud. The next Monday, I walked in as if nothing happened. I handed in a detailed report, scheduled every pending project, and even sent a list of client contacts. When I walked into his office, he didn't even look up from his screen. "What's up, Clara?" he said, distracted. I placed the envelope on his desk. "My resignation." He finally looked up. Surprise flickered, then disbelief. "You're quitting? You're serious?" "I am." He leaned back in his chair. "Clara, come on, don't be dramatic. You're essential here. Let's talk about this after lunch." I shook my head. "There's nothing to talk about. I just realized loyalty doesn't pay the bills or promotions." For a split second, guilt crossed his face, but then Emily strolled in, holding a coffee cup and smiling like the office was her playground. "Oh, Clara, Uncle Mark just told me the good news. You're taking some time off. I'm so excited to help out while you rest." I looked at her, then at him. He didn't correct her. That's when I knew. He'd already decided who would replace me. I didn't say another word. I just nodded, handed over my ID card, and walked out. No tears, no scene, just silence, the kind that carries more power than anger ever could. But as I stood in the elevator, watching the numbers drop floor by floor, something unexpected filled me. Not sadness, not regret, clarity. I realized I had built almost everything that company relied on: the client relationships, the databases, the internal systems, even the workflow Emily now pretended to understand. Without me, the machine would rust, and maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. The first few days after resigning were strangely peaceful. I slept in for the first time in years. I went for walks, but somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice whispered, "They're using everything you created." That voice grew louder when a few clients called me directly. They didn't even know I had left. "Hey Clara," one of them said, "your new assistant seems confused. She sent us the wrong report." I almost laughed. I apologized and told them I no longer worked there. Their reaction was the same every time. Shock, then disappointment. By the third call, I stopped laughing. Something inside me hardened. I decided I wouldn't interfere. Not yet. I wanted to see what would happen when the foundation cracked. 3 weeks later, I got an email accidentally copied from an old group list I had created. It was from Emily, begging for help. The subject line read, "Urgent client database, missing contacts." My database. The one only I knew how to manage properly because it required a manual sync I'd designed myself. I didn't reply. A day later, another message came, this time from Mr. Richards himself. "Clara, we're having some transition issues. Would you mind consulting for a few hours? We can discuss compensation." I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of satisfaction and irony. I could have said yes, earned easy money, maybe even felt vindicated. But no, revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to be their safety net. So I ignored that one too. That's when the calls started. Voicemails from HR, texts from old colleagues, even Emily herself. "Clara, hi, hope you're doing great. Could you maybe send over the old templates? We can't find them anywhere." I never replied. Instead, I started something new. A friend of mine from a rival company had been trying to poach me for months. I finally said yes. Within days, I was sitting in a sleek new office, this time as operations director. Higher pay, better culture, and most importantly, respect. The funny part, my new company was one of the biggest clients of my old firm. When I saw the first proposal come through from Mr. Richards's department, I smiled. I recognized the formatting, it was mine, poorly copied, filled with errors. Emily's signature sat proudly at the bottom. I didn't reject it immediately. I wanted to see what she'd done. The numbers didn't add up. The strategy section was laughably naive. It was clear she didn't understand half of what she was writing. That night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea, scrolling through the document. Every red flag, every lazy assumption, every copy-paste mistake, it all told the same story. Without me, they were sinking. And that was when the idea started forming. Not revenge, exactly. Justice delivered quietly, elegantly, and on my terms. I loved that new office like you love the smell of rain after a long drought. White walls, green plants that actually looked alive, a window that opened. For the first time in years, work didn't feel like punishment. It felt like a place where skill mattered more than who you ate dinner with. My first week there, I kept finding myself smiling at small things, the quiet buzz of a better coffee machine, the fact that meetings started on time. People genuinely listened. When I spoke, they listened because what I said made sense. Not because I'd been at the company long enough to know the thermostat code. But old habits die slowly. When a Slack ping lit up on my phone and I saw it was from a client who used to be mine, I felt that old pull, same as when someone taps an old scar to see if it still hurts. The message was short. "We got a new proposal from Mark's team. Can you take a look? Feels off." I could have ignored it. I didn't. What followed was a slow, surgical assessment. I printed their proposal, spread it across my desk like evidence. The formatting screamed amateur hour. But what really set my teeth on edge were the assumptions. They'd proposed a timeline that ignored a major integration windows I'd built into the system. They'd budgeted for licenses we didn't need but then omitted a critical compliance step I'd insisted on for years. A line item read, "Manual sync process deprecated." My heart stopped at that. That deprecated comment meant someone had deleted or ignored the manual protocol I'd painstakingly documented because Emily, bless her, thought it was old-fashioned. I could have sent one line, "This is wrong." But revenge isn't shouting. It's quiet demonstration. I rewrote the proposal, not to embarrass them publicly but to show the client how much smoother, cheaper, and safer their plan could be with the right approach. I used our new firm's template, added metrics, and projected realistic time. I highlighted risks they weren't accounting for, and offered an alternative rollout that saved them money and avoided the compliance pitfall. I sent it with a polite note, "Saw your proposal. If you'd like, our team could run a complimentary technical review." They accepted. They took us up on it. The review was the wedge. We ran automated checks, dug into logs, compared backups. What we found read like carelessness, not malice. Misrouted data, misconfigured API keys, clients' contact fields reordered into the wrong columns. But one discovery made my skin prickle: internal transfer that hadn't been authorized, followed by the deletion of an audit log. It wasn't proof of fraud. It looked more like Panica rushed fix after someone realized months of sloppy work were finally catching up. I could have handed the findings to the client and walked away, but there's an art to making consequences land. I wrote a clear executive summary for the client. What was wrong, how it impacted them, and the immediate steps needed to secure their systems. I included screenshots, timestamps, and a reconstruction timeline showing that the changes started the day after I resigned. The client read it, called, and asked the question I'd been waiting for. Do you know who's responsible? I gave them the professional answer they needed. The current team is responsible. And offered to present the material at a scheduled steering meeting. I didn't mention Mr. Richards. I didn't mention Emily. I let the facts do the talking. The meeting was a building I'd known intimately. Same glass walls, same mahogany table where I'd once defended budgets and stayed late to smooth over a CEO's temper. The room smelled of lemon cleaner and nerves. Emily sat at the head, hair perfectly curled, clutching a tablet with one eye on slides and one on her reflection. Mr. Richards sat beside her, the way some men sit near a trophy, possessive and proud. I stepped up, introduced myself as a consultant from the vendor helping with their review, and watched their faces shift when they recognized my voice. Emily's smile faltered. Mr. Richards blinked like someone who'd just had a cold splash of water thrown at him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I walked through the evidence slowly, as if telling a story that anyone in the room could follow. Screenshots that showed wrong fields. Charts that mapped out how customer outreach had fallen by 20% after that new method was implemented. An annotated timeline showing the audit log deletion. I kept my sentences short, where it mattered. Let the room hold each point. When I explained the compliance gap and the potential fines tied to it, the air in the room thickened. Heads tilted. The client's legal counsel made a noise that was half alarm, half recognition. Emily tried to speak halfway through, an attempt to redirect, to say we're fixing it, but her words were thin. She couldn't explain the missing logs. She didn't know how because she hadn't been the one who'd created or maintained them. Mr. Richards tried to protect her. His voice, a practiced calm. We're taking steps, he said. We had an interim person managing operations. That interim was me. In their eyes, they had been using my legacy as a blanket. The client, who had been patient for months, didn't need much more. They asked blunt questions about governance and continuity plans. They wanted to know how long the snafus had been happening. The board members stared at the slide that showed the correlation between the moment responsibility shifted and the drop in performance. A hand went up. Is this due to nepotism? It hung there like an accusation. I didn't say yes. I didn't need to. The room had already filled in the blanks. What mattered to them was that their business hung in the balance. After the meeting, the client quietly pulled their contract under review. They requested a full forensic audit. They paused the next project. Within a week, several of their peers professionals who sat on the same steering committees started asking questions. Small ripples became a current. It didn't happen overnight, but the old company began to wobble. Clients asked for more detailed postmortems. Vendors called, wondering if payment schedules were affected. HR started asking for a list of who had access to what. Emily, who had been so sure, grew defensive and sharp. She snapped at junior staff when they asked for clarifications, her voice revealing how little she actually knew. I watched from the sidelines professionally, clinically while the cracks widened. But I wasn't finished. I'd learned long ago that the strongest pressure on a rotten structure is application from unexpected places. If we were going to make this collapse meaningful, it had to be public enough to call out the system that rewarded incompetence. Not just a private loss of a contract. I reached out to a journalist I knew through a friend. Someone who covered corporate governance and had a nose for a story about nepotism. I didn't feed them gossip. I gave them a narrative backed by documents and client testimonials. A pattern of favoritism, sudden workflow changes, and the deletion of an audit trail that had hidden the growing risk. I framed it as a consumer protection story. When companies put convenience and family ties over competence, customers pay the price. The journalist loved facts, not fury. I gave them both. Over the next 2 weeks, a neatly written piece appeared on a reputable industry outlet. The headline asked a question: when nepotism overrides competence, who pays? And within the article, they used examples directly tied to the mishandled proposal and the missing logs. The piece quoted a client who'd asked to remain anonymous but was blunt. We felt like we were guinea pigs in an experiment. The article spread. Clients called. Potential hires scrolled past the open roles and hesitated. Internal whispers turned into formal complaints. Board members, who'd been on vacation, returned to find their year-over-year growth projections dotted with red. The CEO, who had once seemed insulated from the day-to-day, now wanted to know why operations had been outsourced to an inexperienced relative. I watched all of this unfold with the calm of someone watching a slow-motion unraveling. It wasn't delight in schadenfreude more, a fierce, quiet satisfaction that the invisible thread of fairness had been tugged back into place. And then came the emails. HR sent a formal request for a review of the promotion processes. A consulting firm was engaged to do an internal audit. Stakeholders demanded minutes from meetings that had been off the veneer of control their family narrative had created began to peel. But the most delicious part was how Mr. Richards reacted. He'd always deflected with charm. When the board called him in, that charm was a thin fabric. He tried to explain that the niece had been bringing fresh energy, that pinch of paternal pride flashing in his eyes. He used phrases like talent pipeline and soft skills. The board, handling hard numbers and legal risk, heard mismanagement. At home that night, I sat with a cup of tea and didn't celebrate. I only allowed myself a single private observation. The people who'd belittled me for being too traditional were now scrambling to patch holes I'd warned about for years. The irony tasted oddly sweet. But this wasn't the endgame. Exposing mismanagement and losing clients were satisfying. But I wanted structural change, a lesson that one person couldn't wreck an entire department because of family ties. For that, the board needed to take action that prevented such a scenario from happening again. So I took one more step. I drafted a template, a governance package, outlining clear promotion criteria, documentation standards, access controls, and audit requirements. I didn't send it to Mr. Richards. I sent it to the client's board and the consulting firm handling the audit. Packaged as a neutral best practices guide, it was professional, thorough, and mercilessly practical. It read like the manual I'd always wanted to leave behind. Within a month, the consulting firm recommended formal policy changes. The client adopted them. They also put out a public statement about tightening vendor oversight. The ripple reached my old company through a chain of emails and phone calls. Their reputation took a hit. The shareholders who had tolerated cozy decisions began to ask for accountability. And then, because consequences like this like to wrap themselves in poetic timing, company announced an internal restructuring. Human Resources released a statement acknowledging areas for improvement in their promotion processes and the need to review operational oversight. Mr. Richards was asked to step down from the operations committee. Emily was moved to a different role, one with less client-facing responsibility, and told she'd receive training. The language was careful, neutral, designed to keep lawsuits at bay, but anyone who'd been there long enough could read between the lines. I won't pretend I didn't feel something cruelly satisfying when I saw the stock dip for 2 days after the press release. I won't pretend I didn't smile when people who had once ignored me started sending me tentative messages, asking for my advice, apologizing for not listening. Those messages were a small reset. I didn't respond to most of them. I didn't need to. Still, even with clients won or lost and policies rewritten, there was one part of the story I'd kept to myself, the human detail that made the corporate fall feel personal. I wanted the moment when they felt the truth, not just heard it. That moment would come soon, and I would make sure it landed where it hurt. Pride. A week after the restructuring announcement, I got an invitation I wasn't expecting, a leadership summit. It was an annual industry event, the kind that mixed real business with champagne and polite networking. The organizers had reached out to me through my new company. They wanted me to sit on a panel called Resilience and Reinvention, Leading Through Change. The irony didn't escape me. The audience list included executives from several major firms, including my old company. Mr. Richards and Emily were both confirmed attendees. For a few days, one debated declining. Revenge is one thing. Rubbing salt in a wound can make you look petty. But this wasn't about gloating anymore. It was about showing what competence looks like when it's given a chance to breathe. So I accepted. The morning of the summit, I dressed carefully. A simple black suit, gold studs, hair tied back. Confident, controlled. Impossible to ignore but not loud. As I stood backstage waiting for the moderator's cue, I caught sight of Emily across the room. She was talking too quickly to someone from HR, her smile tight, the way people smile when they're trying to look unbothered. Mr. Richards was farther away, scanning the crowd with the restless eyes of a man who knows his authority has slipped. When my name was announced, I stepped onto the stage to polite applause. The lights were bright, the air humming with that conference buzz of coffee and ambition. The moderator introduced us. then asked about moments that had tested our professional loyalty. I told my story and edited version. I didn't use names. I didn't need to. I spoke about loyalty being a two-way street, about how underestimation can either crush you or forge you. I spoke about systems that reward nepotism and how dangerous that can be, not just for morale but for business itself. Every word was deliberate, grounded in the same calm authority that used to be dismissed as too serious. As I talked, I saw faces shift in the audience. Some nodded slowly. Some glanced toward Mr. Richards. Emily's eyes dropped to the floor. When I finished, the applause wasn't loud but steady, genuine. After the session, people came to shake my hand. A few asked for advice. One even asked if I'd be open to consulting for their firm. It was everything I'd worked for, years overdue. But the real moment came later. As I was leaving, Mr. Richards caught up to me near the exit. He looked older, not physically, but in the way pride sags when it finally runs out of excuses. "Clara," he said quietly, "you did well. I've read the audits. You were right about everything." For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. I didn't want to be right. I said, "I just wanted to be treated fairly." He nodded, searching for something else to say. "Emily's struggling. She wasn't ready." "She'll learn," I replied. "If she wants to." There was no venom in my voice, just truth. He nodded again, then walked away, shoulders slightly hunched, as if even standing upright had become an effort. Later that evening, Emily approached me in the lobby. She looked nothing like the bright, confident girl who'd breezed into my life months ago. Her voice was softer now. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "I thought I could handle it. I didn't know how much you actually did." I looked at her. Really looked. She was young, and maybe she'd just been a pawn in someone else's pride. "Apology accepted," I said simply. "Just remember, if you get a chance you didn't earn, work twice as hard to deserve it." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I will." Then she left, heels clicking like punctuation marks fading into the distance. Outside, the evening air felt light. I walked to my car, the city skyline glowing around me, and thought about how far I'd come. There was no grand vengeance scene, no dramatic downfall, just balance restored. They had underestimated me, taken advantage of my silence, and then watched that silence turn into something powerful enough to dismantle their comfort. As I drove home, I realized something important. Revenge isn't always destruction, it's redirection. It's turning every ounce of humiliation into momentum. I hadn't burned bridges. I'd built a better one and let the old one crumble under its own weight. When I got home, I placed my old boss lady mug on a new shelf, not as a reminder of bitterness, but of strength. I'd proven that loyalty, when placed in the wrong hands, becomes a leash, but when you take it back, it becomes a weapon or a key. In the end, I didn't need them to fall for me to rise. They just had to watch me walk away and succeed without them. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all.